Welcome to my official Week 1 predictions for the 2024 college football season. In this video, I will go through every top 25 game, I will predict the over-unders and the spreads, as well as predict the scores. We're going to kind of zoom through these predictions pretty quick because most of the games are just cupcake games for these ranked teams. Thursday night has 4 ranked teams playing FCS schools, so let's go through these pretty quick. The first game is number 24 NC State versus Western Carolina. I think this NC State team is a sleeper this year. I think they have great offensive upside. And I think NC State and that offense gets rolling early, and I think they win that game 48-10. There are no spreads or over-unders for these games because they are against FCS schools. The next game is number 11 Missouri versus Murray State. Similar to NC State, Missouri has some sneaky good offensive upside. And I do think Missouri wins this game pretty easily. I think they win it 49-7. And then we got number 22, Kansas versus Lindenwood. I'm excited to see the return of Jalen Daniels, and it's scary how much offensive talent Lance Leipold has on this team. So they could be a sneaky team as well, and I do think Kansas wins this game 52-10. The next game is number 12, Utah versus Southern Utah. This will be the last Thursday night ranked game. And in the Big 12, you have multiple returning quarterbacks. You have Jalen Daniels returning from injury, and you have a guy like Cam Rising who has been injured since 2022. Cam Rising is the guy that led Utah to back-to-back Pac-12 championship games in 2021 and 2022. He's the guy that I think is going to go off in 2024, so I do think Utah beats Southern Utah 37-7. Let's move on to the only Friday night ranked game. We have number 16 Oklahoma versus Temple. And this game actually has an over-under and a spread. But don't get confused, this game will not be close at all. Oklahoma is going to run up the score. They have one of the top offenses in the country. There's definitely some questions on the offensive line, but they got great playmakers at wide receiver, and I think Jackson Arnold is going to go off in this game. So I got Oklahoma winning this game 63-7, and I got Oklahoma minus 43, and I have the over 58.5 for this game. Okay, now that we got those cupcake games out of the way, let's move on to some bigger games. And we have a Saturday 12 p.m. Eastern Time kickoff game between number 1 Georgia versus number 14 Clemson. This is technically a neutral site game that will be played in Atlanta, Georgia, but Georgia is probably going to have more of the home field advantage in this game. And I have Georgia winning this game 34-14. I have Georgia covering the spread, and I have the under 49.5. I just don't see this Clemson team being able to put up a fight against Georgia. Clemson returned some offensive starters, but I don't think they have nearly as much talent on offense as Georgia does. Cade Klubnik doesn't do it at quarterback for me, and I think Clemson could have another 8-4 and 9-3 year easily. Georgia, on the other hand, they are tied for first in the SEC for returning starters. They have one of the best quarterbacks in the SEC back, Carson Beck. They lost Brock Bowers, but they have a lot of guys who could step up, and they have Oscar Delp at tight end, who was one of the best tight ends in the country even after Brock Bowers left. So I really don't see a way Clemson stays in this game, at least for the whole game. I think it could be a close game in the first half, but Georgia is going to take this game away and dominate them in the second half. So I do have Georgia winning this game pretty big. The next game is West Virginia versus number 8 Penn State. West Virginia actually has this game at home, so do not sleep on West Virginia in this game. But I do have Penn State winning the game 30-17. I have Penn State covering the spread, and I have the under 51.5 for this game. I've seen a few people picking West Virginia to win the Big 12 this season. I mean, Pat McAfee did pick West Virginia to win the Big 12, but personally, I'm not buying it. I still don't trust Neil Brown as a head coach, and I don't think they have great offensive playmakers. Garrett Green is a really good quarterback, and they have multiple offensive linemen returning, but I still have some question marks with the defense. And I don't think Penn State drops this game even on the road. Penn State usually struggles against good defenses with great pass rushes, but West Virginia isn't that type of team. West Virginia doesn't have this suffocating defense, and I think Penn State should win this game pretty comfortably. Maybe they don't dominate this game, and I do think it could take a little bit of time to get going. But Penn State is way too talented of a team, and I don't see them dropping this game. They have a lot of guys back from last season. So I have Penn State winning this game 30-17. Now we got a couple more cupcake games. We have number 25 Iowa versus Illinois State. And I actually think Iowa scores 30 points in this game. I think they win at 34-3. This doesn't mean I think Iowa is taking this big step forward offensively. I don't trust Cade McNamara at quarterback, and they just don't have great offensive talent. The defense should be really good. But don't overreact to this game if Iowa manages to put up 30 or 40 points. But regardless, Iowa should win this game pretty easily. And another game that is going to be a blowout is the game between number 15 Tennessee and Chattanooga. Chattanooga is a pretty bad FCS team, and Tennessee is a team that could go off this season with Nico Iamaleava at quarterback. I also like what Tennessee has defensively. They don't return a lot of guys, but they return one of the best defensive players in the country, James Pierce Jr. Their defensive line should be really good this season, and I do think they could improve in the secondary. The defense has been on the rise, and the offense should take a step forward in 2024 with more offensive playmakers and Nico Iamaleava at quarterback. So I actually think Tennessee gets the shutout in this game, 49-0. Let's move on to another FBS versus FCS matchup. We have number 17 Oklahoma State versus South Dakota State. Unlike the other FBS versus FCS matchups, this will actually be a decent matchup because South Dakota State has been one of the best historical FCS programs, and they're going to be pretty good next season as well. But I really do think that offensive line for Oklahoma State is going to control this game for the most part, and Oklahoma State has the best running back in the country coming back, Ollie Gordon. So Oklahoma State should win this game 35-17. I think they cover the spread, and I'm taking the under 53.5 for this game. This is going to be a tricky test for Oklahoma State, but I think Mike Gundy will have his team ready to play, and their run game is going to be too good for a team like South Dakota State. I do think South Dakota State manages to score some points because Oklahoma State has some questions defensively, and I'm interested to see how Oklahoma State plays in this game because they have not been a super consistent team. At least last year, they were not consistent at all. But I do think Oklahoma State starts the season off pretty good, and I think they win the game 35-17. And we got another cupcake game, and this is the number 2 team, Ohio State, playing Akron. This game is not going to be close at all, and it's honestly embarrassing that this game has a spread of 50. The spread could honestly be higher because Ohio State is going to run up the score in this game. I mean, they have one of the greatest offensive minds in college football running that offense, Chip Kelly. Ohio State is going to dominate Akron even more than they did last year. I think they win this game 73-3. They easily cover that spread, and I'm definitely taking the over 57.5 for this game. Definitely keep an eye on Will Howard in this game, but don't overreact if he puts up these crazy numbers because they're playing against a terrible Akron team. But I do think with guys like Henderson and Judkins in the backfield, they're going to dominate this game and get some big runs. And Will Howard and that offense will go off. There's too many weapons at wide receiver for this team to just struggle against this Akron team. I don't even see them putting up less than 60 points. This game is going to get out of hand quick. And I think Ohio State puts up 73 on Akron. Let's move on to another game that's kind of a cupcake game, but I wouldn't necessarily say that. The next game is number 4 Texas versus Colorado State, and I actually think Colorado State is going to be a decent group of 5 team this year. Ultimately, they don't stand a chance of beating Texas. I think Texas wins this game 40-17, but I do think Colorado State covers the 32.5 spread, and I have the under 59.5. Colorado State returns their quarterback and their star receiver, Tory Horton. This team has been improving over the last couple of years with head coach Jay Norvell, and I think they are going to be a bit better in 2024. And they could put up some points in this game. Texas struggled in the passing game last season defensively, and Colorado State could take advantage of that. So Colorado State might put up some points in this game, but don't get it twisted. Texas is easily winning this game. Steve Sarkisian is a great offensive mind. Texas will put up points in this game. Texas may have lost their running back CJ Baxter, but Quinn Ewers is a great quarterback, and they have some decent running backs. And they added guys like Silas Bolden, Matthew Golden, and Isaiah Bond out of the portal, and they have one of the top offensive lines in the SEC. Texas should be a great team this year, and I think they start the season beating Colorado State 40-17. Let's now move on to one of the most hyped up games of the 2024 college football season, and that game is Florida versus number 19 Miami. I do think Miami wins this game 34-23. I have them covering the spread of 2.5, and I have the over 53.5. And I know the Swamp is a brutal place to play. Just look what Florida did to a Utah team in the Swamp a few years back. Utah ultimately went on to win the Pac-12 championship game that year. So don't sleep on Florida in this game. They have a lot of guys returning. They returned their quarterback Graham Mertz, and they added some great receivers out of the portal like Elijah Badger and Shamir Dyke. But I just think this Miami team is too talented. I didn't pick them to win the ACC in the preseason, but after seeing Florida State play, I think they are my favorite to win the ACC. Ultimately, I'm not giving up on Florida State yet. But if Florida State doesn't turn it around and Miami plays a great game against Florida, I might switch my pick to Miami winning the ACC. Because Miami is just too talented of a team. They have one of the most talented rosters in the country, and they added Cam Ward from the portal, and they also added Damian Martinez, 2 very good offensive players. Cam Ward is probably a top 10 college football quarterback, maybe even top 5 if he puts up a great year, and Damian Martinez is also a beast at running back. They have one of the top receiving corps in the ACC. Both Restrepo and George are back, and they combined for nearly 2,000 yards last season. This Miami offense is going to be really good. And the front seven should also be really good with some important pieces back. I still have to see more from the secondary because that is a weakness, but they do have some young guys that can step up. And they also added some pieces through the portal. I know a lot of people have questions with Mario Cristobal as a head coach, but there is just too much talent on this Miami roster. I think they get the big win in week 1 against Florida, and I have Miami winning this game 34-23. The next game is number 5 Alabama versus Western Kentucky. This is not a huge matchup, but I'm interested to see how that Alabama offense looks with the new head coach, Kalen DeBoer. We know this Alabama team is still going to win games, but they're certainly going to have a different identity with the new head coach, Kalen DeBoer. And the offense is going to look a little bit different, I know for sure. And don't be surprised if Jalen Milroe takes a big leap this year. And Alabama's going to put up points in this game. I do like what Western Kentucky has offensively, so I do think Western Kentucky could put up some points as well. But I also think Alabama wins this game 49-16, and I have Alabama covering the spread. Let's move on to a couple more cupcake games. We have a few good FBS teams playing against FCS teams. The first game is number 6 Ole Miss versus Furman. I think Ole Miss will run up the score just like they did last year. I think Ole Miss put up 70 points on Furman last year. This year, I think they win the game 66-7. I think more of the focus on this Ole Miss team should be how that defensive line looks with a bunch of the new faces like Walter Nolan and Princely U up front. But that offense is going to go off, no questions asked. They have Jackson Dart, they have Trey Harris. They also added Juice Wells out of the portal. This offense is going to be one of the best in the country this season. So give me Ole Miss big in this game. The next game is number 18 Kansas State versus UT Martin. I don't think Kansas State's going to completely run up the score this year. I think they win at 41-10, but I do think this Kansas State offense is being really slept on this year. I do think they could have some growing pains early in the season with the offense because they have some new faces. Dylan Edwards is a new face. Avery Johnson is a first-year starter at quarterback. And they have some questions on the offensive line because they lost some pieces there. But Kansas State is my favorite to win the Big 12 right now. And I really like Avery Johnson at quarterback, and I love what they have in the backfield with Dylan Edwards and DJ Giddens, who was a 1,000-yard rusher last season. I think Kansas State wins this game easily, 41-10. The next game is number 3 Oregon versus Idaho. Idaho is actually a pretty solid FCS team, but they have no chance against Oregon. Oregon is out to prove a lot of things this season. They have to prove that they belong in the Big Ten. I think Oregon should ultimately want a shutout in this game to show that this defense is legit. They have some guys returning and they added some huge pieces, definitely in the secondary, with guys like Kobe Savage and Jabbar Muhammad. This defense should be really good next season, and do not sleep on this Oregon defense. I know a lot of people don't think they're physical enough to compete with Ohio State and Michigan, but you couldn't be any more wrong. Dan Lanning has had this team built at the line of scrimmage. They took a step forward last season and they were a lot better at the line of scrimmage. I expect them to take another step forward this season, and I think that means they will be competitive with Michigan and Ohio State at the line of scrimmage. And don't be surprised if Oregon is the better line of scrimmage team. But even if they have some questions defensively, that offense will probably be a top 3 offense in the country. They lost Bo Nix, but they literally added a copy and paste quarterback in Dylan Gabriel. He plays a little different than Bo Nix, but he'll put up very similar numbers to Bo Nix. And this Oregon offense will go off next season, and I think they win this game 63-6. Let's move on to the biggest game of week 1. Well, at least Game Day thinks that because they picked this game, and that game is number 20 Texas A&M versus number 7 Notre Dame. And I think Mike Elko and Texas A&M gets it done in week 1. I have them winning this game 30-24. I have A&M covering the minus 2.5, and I have the over 46.5. A lot of people are probably taking the under in this game, and a lot of people think it will be low scoring. But I do think these offenses are going to show out a little bit more this season, and I like Texas A&M to find success running the ball in this game. Texas A&M is going to have a packed house for this game, and Notre Dame has some new guys. They have some new weapons at wide receiver. They have a new quarterback in Riley Leonard. They have a new offensive coordinator, and Jeremiah Love is going to be a first-year starter at running back. Texas A&M has a bunch of new faces as well, but Mike Elko knows how to win early. Just look at what he did at Duke last season, leading Duke to a 28-7 victory over Clemson. I don't think Texas A&M is a better team than Notre Dame, but I do think Texas A&M is a really talented team, and Mike Elko is going to make a difference there. And I don't think Texas A&M is much worse than Notre Dame, and I think early in the season, Texas A&M could beat Notre Dame at their home place. And right now, the only game I have Notre Dame losing this season is to open the season on the road against Texas A&M. So that would be a pretty good season to only lose to A&M and go 11-1. But it would also be huge if Notre Dame got a win in week 1 on the road against Texas A&M. but I do think A&M gets it done and wins this game 30-24. And the next game is number 9 Michigan versus Fresno State. And I actually think Fresno State will keep this game surprisingly close. I have Michigan winning at 28-19, but I have Fresno State covering the 21.5 spread, and I have the over 45.5. I do think Michigan is going to take time to figure it out offensively early in the season. I don't really trust Alex Orji at quarterback, and he is a very unproven passer, and they also have 5 new starting offensive linemen. And Fresno State is not a team you want to sleep on. They have showed in the past that they can compete with good Power 5 teams. And I like what Fresno State has. They have Mikey Keene back at quarterback, and they have some solid defensive upside. So I think Fresno State can do enough to keep this game close, but ultimately they have no shot at beating Michigan on the road. Michigan's defense will be suffocating, and Michigan will do enough to win this game. So I do think Michigan gets it done 28-19, but I do think it will be closer than people expect. Now let's move on to the last game of Saturday. This game will be a 10:30 p.m. Eastern Time kickoff game, and this game is between number 21 Arizona and New Mexico. I think Arizona wins this game 41-13, but the spread is very high at 30.5, and I think New Mexico covers that spread. And I also have the under 57.5. I watched New Mexico play last week a little bit. They do not look like a great team, but they showed some promise offensively. Ultimately, they gave up that big lead to Montana State last week and they lost that game. But I do think New Mexico could be able to score some points against Arizona, and I think that will be enough to cover. But no, New Mexico stands no chance in this game. Arizona is going to dominate this game. Do not sleep on this Arizona team this year. I've been saying it for a majority of this offseason. Noah Fafita and Tetairoa McMillan are going to go off, and Arizona has a very slept-on secondary. They also returned their leading tackler from last season at linebacker Jacob Manu. So the defense should be pretty solid. They have some questions up front with a bunch of new faces at defensive tackle and on the edges. I know they have a whole new coaching staff, but they returned some very important guys from last season. And do not be surprised if they manage to win the Big 12. Right now, I don't have them winning the Big 12 because I do have some questions up front. But if they figure it out on the defensive line, I'm going to have high expectations for this Arizona team this season. And I think they play a great game against New Mexico to open the season, and I think they win the game 41-13. Let's move on to the exciting Sunday night game between number 13 LSU and number 23 USC. This game is going to be very high scoring. I don't think there's a way this game ends up under 63.5. These defenses were just too bad last season, and these offenses are going to be one of the best in their conferences. So this game could honestly end up in the 50s, but I do think the defenses will show a little bit of growth this year. But ultimately, I think LSU is more talented of a team and they get it done. I have LSU winning this game 42-34. I have LSU covering the spread and I have the over 63.5. LSU has a bunch of offensive linemen back. They'll have one of the best offensive lines in the country this season. And I think that's where they control this game, running the ball down USC's throats. And when USC stacks the box in this game, they have Garrett Nussmeier to throw the ball deep. So this LSU offense should do enough to win this game. And I just trust LSU more to win this game, but I wouldn't be surprised if USC won this game. USC has one of the best defensive coaching staffs in the country, but it's not going to be a one-year turnaround in the Big Ten. They were just too bad last season. But on the other hand, I don't think they will be as bad as last season because how could they be as bad as they were last season? This is going to be a shootout. I think it could be a back-and-forth game. But in the end, I think LSU pulls away late in this game and wins it 42-34. Now let's move on to the final game of next week. And that game will be the Monday night game between number 10 Florida State and Boston College. I do think Florida State is going to bounce back. I have Florida State winning this game 33-17. But I do think Boston College covers the spread, and I have the under 50.5. I actually picked Georgia Tech to beat Florida State, but I also picked Florida State to bounce back and win the ACC. But I really don't know if that's going to happen because let's be honest, that offense looked horrible against Georgia Tech. And Boston College is not a team you want to take lightly. They won a bowl game last season, and they have guys back from last season, including a quarterback that ran all over you last season. That guy is Thomas Castellanos. Boston College almost beat Florida State last season. But I do think because they lost to Georgia Tech, there's going to be too much this team has to prove, and I do think they will bounce back. But boy, would it be embarrassing if Florida State lost to Boston College as well. If Florida State also loses to Boston College, they will be more of a clown show than they were before. But regardless, I still think they have time to find that wide receiver number 1. And maybe DJU can take some more shots down the field. But Florida State doesn't look like a top 10 or even a top 25 team. I don't want to overreact to week 0, but they still have a lot to prove to me. But anyways, that is going to do it for my week 1 predictions. Be sure to like the video and also subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. And if you guys love college football, then you'll love this channel because we upload a ton of college football content and we basically cover everything on this channel. So definitely consider subscribing and also consider checking out my socials down in the description below. But that is going to do it, guys, and peace out.